Hey folks, it's Patriot Nurse. Why can't you assume that the hospital is safe anymore? Well, definitely if you are a conservative or a traditionally minded person, you're definitely going to want to stay tuned for this broadcast today, because we're going to unveil some of the more troubling pathology that has been released recently from healthcare providers, in particular 3 nurses who you really should be aware of, and be recognized that these nurses are not alone, and that odds are that eventually you will run into their ilk in the hospital setting. How do you self-select out of them, and can you self-select out of their care? This is very important. We're going to talk about this today, how to shield yourself from these types of people, and really help you understand and unpack why it is that this pathology and this sickness, this wickedness has taken root in our healthcare system. And really, my hope is that you're going to be able to keep your family away from them. So friends, we're going to go over 3 different people today. And rather than do a blow by blow, which I originally tried to do, I think I'm just going to summarize these and give you the snippets that are relevant. So in the video today, we're going to cover 3 healthcare providers who have since had their licenses either revoked or censured, and whom all have been fired from their jobs. So the first is Keep It Toxic, Melinda Cook.
Sabotage tactic, or at least scare tactic. All the medical providers, grab some syringes with needles on the end. Have them full of saline or succinylcholine, whatever. That will probably be a deterrent. For today's resistance tip, I vote, anybody got any poison ivy, poison oak in their yard? Get some of that up with gloves, obviously. Get it in some water. Get the poison ivy oak water, and I'm gonna put it into a water gun. Aim for faces, hands. All right, the single ladies where these ICE guys are going, get on Tinder, get on Hinge, find these guys. They're around. They're an ICE agent. Bring some X-Lax and put it in their drinks. Get them sick. Nobody's gonna die. Just enough to incapacitate them, get them off the street for the next day. Let's make their lives fucking miserable.
So Melinda was a nurse, I should say. She's been fired from her job at VCU. Having this background myself, and having worked not only in some of the areas that these people are practicing, but also having worked with the drugs that they practice with, it's very concerning for me to hear the things that they advocate for. But like myself, having worked in inpatient psych, labor and delivery, home health as an aspect thereof, and also having a stint in emergency and trauma, there is a lot of toxicity in the nursing world. And I want you to be aware of this, and I want you to see it. Now, Melinda has advocated that as part of her resistance, that she totally is cool with running around with syringes of a paralytic agent, succinylcholine, to paralyze people's ability to breathe and to basically kill them unless they're intubated. Melinda, as a CRNA, this is something you really need to understand about this woman. CRNAs are certified registered nurse anesthetists. These are effectively 1 degree below an anesthesiologist. CRNAs are some of the most, heavily weighted as far as their responsibility of the nursing field, because they work with very narrow bandwidths, very narrow margins of error, very, very deadly drugs. These are the people involved in mixing drugs to keep you sedated when you're in surgery, to keep you breathing, and to effectively mix these drugs appropriately based on your body chemistry, based on other drugs that are in your system, and based on really your body mass, fat index. There's a lot of science that goes into this. They have to perform to a certain level on their test-taking capability, and in their competitive nature clinically, they have to be able to get to a certain level to even receive schooling for this license. Now, I myself actually had the intention of, when I went into nursing school, going for the CRNA program. And after I did some shadowing, I realized that I like to interact with my patients. I don't like them asleep on the table all the time. But it takes a very unique type of person to be a CRNA. I've known some good ones, and as you're going to see with this chick, there are some awful ones out there who really should probably be institutionalized for their safety and ours. So here's the problem with both Melinda and this next guy that I'm going to show you here, Eric Martindale.
Another Florida nurse barred after a controversial social media post. Florida Attorney General James Uthmeyer says Eric Martindale is no longer a registered nurse in the state of Florida after he posted on social media that he would refuse to provide anesthesia for Republican patients. The action comes 1 day after a Boca Raton nurse faced similar consequences for posting a video wishing health complications during childbirth for President Donald Trump's press secretary, Caroline Leavitt.
So Eric Martindale had basically posted that he wouldn't care for MAGA patients, and it was his right to refuse care to them, which is kind of funny to me because it's like, how are you going to know mid-surgery your patient's political beliefs? Are you going to stalk each and every one of your patients before they come in and then determine whether or not you're going to walk out in the middle of surgery? Are you going to get coverage for them? Just a question here, because that's a patient abandonment thing. You don't just turn around and leave your patients on the table, intubated and mixed with God knows what, and then say, okay, well, I'm going to refuse to treat. No, it doesn't work that way. Sorry, especially when you're a CRNA. You have a much higher level of responsibility and a much higher mantle that is upon you as far as your expectation and duty of care. So Eric Martindale basically said, nope, like, I'm not going to care for these people. I'm going to basically just let whatever happen to them. But the thing that I want you to understand is that CRNAs, you do not really have an ability to consent to these people. You would not know that they're caring for you because you're going to be out by the time that you realize who they are. And this is one of the reasons why their state boards, particularly in Florida, I'm not sure about Melinda because she was at VCU. She's in Virginia, in the Richmond area. But both of these nurses were censured to the degree that they were, not because they don't have a right to free speech, but because you literally are saying here that patients deserve to die, Melinda. Patients deserve to die because they're ICE or because their political beliefs don't quite line up with yours. And how is it that a patient is going to know that you're the one caring for them? They can't. So you as a patient are in a very vulnerable position when you go, A, for surgery anyway, and then B, when you go under and are anesthetized by these people. Whoever has control of your anesthesia basically is holding your life, your heartbeat, your breath in their hands. But they cannot defy God. So it's his will that ultimately determines our fate. But the third woman that we need to speak about is a woman named Lexie Lawler. Now, this one hits home to me personally as a labor and delivery nurse, having worked labor and delivery for several years. Lexie Lawler has since lost her nursing license in Florida. She was working at a hospital in Boca Raton. And Lexie didn't like Caroline Leavitt to the point where she basically advocated that she sincerely hoped that Caroline would get a 4th-degree tear in delivering her child.
As a labor and delivery nurse, it gives me great joy to wish Caroline Leavitt a 4th-degree tear. I hope that you f***ing rip from bow to stern and never shit normally again, you
Let me be very clear about something. This is sexual violence. This is advocating for sexual violence. You want to understand why it is that women who are supposedly, the bastions of moral goodness, like nurses, could stand by idly and allow such heinous things throughout history, like Hitler's nurses and the camps. You're just complicit with all this stuff. Look at the face of Lexie Lawler. That's who you're looking at. Lexie Lawler, in advocating for sexual violence against Caroline Leavitt, that effectively her genitals be so marred and disfigured that she couldn't have a bowel movement appropriately through childbirth. This woman is responsible in her day-to-day practice, not only for caring for women during their most vulnerable phase of life in giving birth, but also is charged with the care of their newborns. Let that sink in for a minute. Now, in the state of Florida, the electorate doesn't exactly jive en masse with Lexie Lawler's opinions. Nonetheless, she's holding by this. So when you look mathematically at the likelihood that Lexie Lawler would encounter people similar to Caroline Leavitt in their political beliefs, the odds are greater than not that her patient population is politically conservative and definitely against what she espouses. So you can't really trust that someone who's going to take these positions, violent positions, is going to give good care. So what do we do about this, friends? This is the troubling reality. I want to unpack why it is that these nurses behave in the way that they do before advocating and giving you a step-by-step to what to do to avoid this. When it comes to these advanced practice nurses, like, for instance, Melinda and Eric, who have been since censured by their state boards and fired, I believe, certainly in Melinda's case. A lot of these people who go into advanced practice nursing, and frankly, people who pursue advanced degrees anyway, they have very mixed motives for this. And in particular, with the health sciences, there's kind of a Venn diagram here of power, money, and nurturing/beneficence. And usually people who go into the healthcare fields will have a mixture of two of the three dominant. So, for instance, the healthy nurses, the healthy healthcare providers, the ones that actually have a moral center and who are God-fearing, they usually have a higher prevalence of focus and impact in their lives on the nurturing side of things and the money side of things. Because let's face it, wanting to go into a career to make money is reasonable. It's reasonable to want to make enough money so that you have a roof over your head and that you can provide for your family the life that you desire. That is good and just. Nurturing and beneficence is another part of this. But then there's a third part, which is the power. And this is where you get into a lot of these advanced practice, letters after their name, like the clout expansion. A lot of times the nurses who are the most toxic, and I will stand by this from the very toxic ones that I've had to interact with, the singular most toxic nurses that I have interacted with, they weren't so big on the whole beneficence nurturing thing, but they were hardcore big on the power and the money thing. They go to school and they get these letters because they like to stroke their ego. Usually there's something to prove. A lot of times with the women, there's some daddy hatred involved. Usually some failed relationships, some poor life choices in there. And then ultimately they're angry at the world, so they've got to make up for it with their accolades and the letters after their name. So a lot of times people will do this. They will get these advanced letters after the name to prove something to themselves. And the only way that you're going to know this is really to have decent conversations with them and to see how they are, to ask polite questions like, oh, like, how's your family doing? Or the only way that you're going to know where these people are holding is basically by their small talk or their refusal to do so. This is really where screening your healthcare providers to the degree that you can. And like we said, with the CRNAs, you can't screen them. Unless you are interviewing your entire surgical staff before having a procedure, you're not going to know who your CRNA is, which is why it's so egregious that these people are advocating for the things that they are. But you need to understand the layer of power that they seek. Okay, a lot of healthcare providers love power and control over people. CRNAs in particular, you got to watch out for them. They love playing around with the chemicals, to mix the chemicals. They love the geeks and the beakers. They love that stuff because they love holding people's lives in their hands. And to a great degree, the coping mechanisms that are constructed around having jobs that effectively make you miserable going in and out day after day, they lend to very dark and gallows humor. But moreover, the power structure that is inherent with medicine in general, it really opens up a very dark portal into the human psyche. And before we really unpack how it is further that we can shield ourselves from these people, let me advise you to do a little bit of research into the Stanford Prison Experiment, also known as the Phil Zimbardo Prison Study. So the Zimbardo Prison Study is a quite famous psychological experiment that was halted early due to the ethical concerns for the participants. Many of whom actually had long-term psychological issues after it. But it evaluated what happens when you put arbitrary power roles upon people in different situations. An artificial construct of power where they had the jailer, the warden, etc., and then the prisoners. And it is disturbing to the deepest part of one's core to see what happens in that experiment. But when you realize that people, when given arbitrary power, will quite quickly become tyrants and exercise the darkest aspects of their human capabilities, it's little wonder that people like Melinda Cook and Eric Martindale and Lexie Lawler exist. They exist because there is a system that rewards them. The system that rewards their probably perennial bullying, their authoritarian viewpoint on things, and their lust for power and money. And when you look at the types of things that they're advocating for, the things that they've said, out of the heart, the mouth speaks. And for someone who holds people's lives in their hands, multiple patients' lives in their hands, day after day after day, to hear this type of debased and gutted lack of humanity is a very concerning thing. But it makes sense when you consider the utter depravity of humanity and that civilization is very thin of a veil. So how do you shield yourself from these people? Well, aside from calling and advocating for their firing from an institution that you have received healthcare services from, you really have to be discerning in seeking care in the system in the first place. And I'm sorry to say this as a nurse, but the system has utterly betrayed not only the good nurses and the good healthcare providers in it by promoting these type of pathological creatures, but it's also betrayed the patients who are sincerely seeking good quality care from someone who has a tender heart and a loving hand. And those days are gone. I'm sorry to tell you that, friends. If you get a good nurse, a good doctor, a good healthcare provider who is watching over you, you need to count your blessings and thank God for them every day. If you're going in to any system that has effectively been weaponized against you, like ours has here in the United States, because it promotes this type of pathology, this psychopathy of these people. These people are the ones who get promoted. And by the way, the fact that Melinda Cook and Lexie Lawler, the fact that this is their venting online, they didn't just do this in a vacuum. This culture of toxicity is regularly enforced in their break rooms, amongst their cohorts, professionally and personally. So this is the baseline of normal that you have to expect when you're going into this system. When you're talking to your healthcare providers, look at their face. Look how it is that they respond to you. And there are various different questions that you could use, like, what if I feel X? Or what you're testing for empathy with these people. What if I'm scared about this outcome? Who do I call? What if someone dismisses your feeling, this is important, like if someone dismisses your feelings around a surgery or your legitimate concerns, especially when you bring up vulnerable emotions like fear, worry, if they dismiss or you see like nothing's happening in between these eyes, you better run. Because what that tells me is they don't have it on in here. So I can guarantee you that day in and day out, Melinda and Lexie in particular, don't know about Eric so much because his post was a little bit more narrow in scope. But these two women, I can tell you, these women are serial lifetime bullies because you don't get to a level of toxicity where you're willing to broadcast that to the world unless you've had consistent reinforcement and approbation from your cohort, which means you either pick people who are like you and surround yourself with them, or you bully everyone around you into submission to just swallow whatever vitriol you spew out. So guys, the system itself is creating nurses like this. They go into it for power, money, most of the time, maybe a little bit of beneficence, or at least the veneer of beneficence, the plausible deniability of beneficence. And so the best thing that you can do, honestly, friends, I'm saying this as a nurse, not only as a nurse, but as a master herbalist, the best thing that you can do is to self-select out of the system, to not go in to care for these people because you do not know who you are going to get. This nurse could be your mother or your father's nurse. This nurse, God forbid, with Lexie Lawler, she could be your wife's caregiver in the most vulnerable position of their life. She could be the one giving your baby a bath at 2, 3, 4 hours old, 1 day, 2 days old. Do you think that she's going to have I wouldn't have the confidence to have Lexie Lawler be my labor and delivery nurse. I wouldn't want that woman within a mile of me. These people are a threat to their patients. And the fact that they could hold the positions that they do tells you that there are more like them. And not only that, when you look at some of the statements from Melinda Cook, she references that the people in her hospital who are thinking like her, part of the resistance, are already keeping ICE agents up. They're already depriving them of good care, as it is. So she may be the loudmouth one, but there are others who are scheming behind the scenes. You don't want any part of this, friends. If you can stay out of this system and avoid it, you need to. And how do you do that? Well, you're going to have to educate yourself. And the times of being able to rely upon the good graces and the oath. And that's the thing. People are like, oh, well, they're Hippocratic oath, or they're nursing the oath, or whatever. Guys, as much as I would like to give credence to that, that is naive. Oaths only keep good and moral people bound who have a compass. People who are depraved and debauched and base level humans like what you've seen here, an oath means nothing to them. Their word means nothing to them. All they care about is getting their power and their money fix. There is not a drop of beneficence there. Don't kid yourself for a second. These people would be the first ones lining up to serve in the concentration camp health bureau. So what do you do to not need them? You got to get rid of your need and dependence upon them in the first place. Now, I recognize that this is a difficult and a challenging thing for people, but you got to educate yourself. You can go to the library for free. You can train online with me. I have courses available, both the 4-hour, 7-hour, and also the new course we launched, which is the Strategic Nutrition for Survival. Guys, I've put my heart and soul into these courses because I care about people like you. I care about your family members not having to suffer at the hands of these wicked and vile people who happen to have letters after their name in white coats. This is far from an isolated issue. It is a systemic problem that I've had to deal with myself. My own family have been abused at the hands of healthcare workers. It's not getting any better, and it won't get any better. And it's not going to get any less expensive either. So if you want to save yourself heartache, money, and misery and not expose yourself to these psychopaths, you got to get out of this system. And the only way that you can reasonably do that is if you educate yourself. And to that end, I've made the courses available online. The back catalog of videos I've made here for free on YouTube for, over a decade now. I think I've been doing this full time for 13 years at this point. It's a long time, Francis. It's a lot of videos. But guys, it's a very disturbing thing. And I wish that it's getting better. I wish that it would get better, but it won't get better. It can't get better because the system keeps rewarding them. And even though they may have lost their licenses, they lost their license to practice in one state. That doesn't mean they can't get it reinstated in another that has a more favorable political climate for their whacked out beliefs. It's not impossible for them to get their license back in a different state or to practice outside the United States. So friends, I hope the video was helpful for y'all. I know it's a little bit dark, but you need to be aware of what's going on. And that was my hope in making this video. I just prayed. I was like, Lord, please help me to share with people, to pull back the curtain and to help people understand why it is that these evil and toxic individuals who just happen to have the banner of nurse over them, how they can't be trusted, and how it is they get into the system, how do they stay in the system, and how is it that we can self-select out of them. Asking questions, looking for empathy on the part of your healthcare providers. If they ain't got it in here, don't you dare go back to them. If you don't see it alive in their eyes, get the heck out of there. When you look into the eyes of these people, they are crazed. They have serious unresolved trauma, and you don't want anything to do with it. Steer clear of them. Get away from them. May the Lord bless and keep y'all. I know it was a rough video, but my hope is that it helped keep somebody's family member safe. If you like the video, friends, please make sure and share it with one person, especially if you know somebody's got a surgery coming up. Share it with one person who you know would benefit from it. Make sure to be subscribed to the channel for all the latest. Click the little bell button. May the Lord bless and keep you all. For now, it's Patriot Nurse signing off. I'll see y'all later.